The cameras had stopped rolling 3 hours ago. It was 1:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, and Marcus Williams was doing what he'd done nearly every night for the past 20 years, cleaning the late show stage. At 58, Marcus moved with practiced efficiency across the Ed Sullivan Theater. His navy blue uniform was pressed, his movements quiet and precise. He always saved the piano for last, that baby grand Steinway sitting stage left, its black lacquer surface catching the dim overhead lights. Tonight, as he approached it with his polishing cloth, something inside him shifted. His hands moved without permission. One moment he was reaching to clean the keys. The next, he was lifting the keyboard cover. Marcus glanced around the empty studio. The security cameras only recorded during business hours. He'd checked years ago in a moment of weakness just like this one. His fingers hovered over the keys. Just one note. He pressed middle C, and the sound rang out with a clarity that made his breath catch. And then, as if his hands belonged to someone else, he began to play. Thelonious Monk's Round Midnight, a piece he'd learned at 19, when the world had been full of possibility and he'd been full of music. His fingers found the melody without hesitation, that haunting theme that spoke of late nights and lost chances. The years fell away. He wasn't a janitor anymore. He was what he'd always been underneath, a musician. Marcus closed his eyes and let the music move through him. His left hand laid down the bass notes, deep and resonant, while his right hand traced the melody in all its chromatic complexity. Monk's music was angular, strange, beautiful in its refusal to conform. Marcus had always loved that about it. It was music that didn't apologize for being different. He moved through the head, then ventured into an improvisation. His hands remembered things his conscious mind had forgotten, passing chords, diminished runs, substitutions that created tension before resolving into something almost unbearably sweet. He was rusty, sure, but the music was still there. It had been waiting all these years, patient as stone, for a moment like this. He didn't hear the door open. He didn't hear the footsteps or see the figure standing in the shadows at the back of the theater. He was somewhere else entirely, in a place where time moved differently, and the only thing that mattered was the conversation between his hands and the piano. He finished with a soft, unresolved chord, the way Monk would have done it, letting it hang in the air like a question. Then he sat very still, his hands resting on the keys, his eyes still closed, trying to hold on to the feeling for just one more second. "How long have you been playing?" Marcus's eyes snapped open. He spun around, heart hammering, and found himself looking at David Letterman. The host stood near the guest chair, wearing jeans and a gray sweater. His glasses caught the dim light. He wasn't smiling, but his face wasn't angry either. It was attentive. "Mr. Letterman." Marcus stood so quickly he nearly knocked over the bench. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." David held up a hand. "It's okay, I came back for my glasses and heard you playing. That was Monk, right?" Marcus nodded, unable to form words. His mind raced through scenarios, getting fired, losing everything for a few minutes at a piano. "How long have you been playing?" David asked again, his voice gentle. Marcus swallowed. "All my life, Mr. Letterman, but never on a real stage." David moved closer until he was standing at the edge of the stage. "What's your name?" "Marcus Williams, custodial staff, 20 years. 20 years? David climbed onto the stage. "You've been cleaning this stage for 20 years and you play like that?" He walked to the piano. "Why are you cleaning stages instead of playing them?" It was the question Marcus had been asking himself for 40 years. "Life," Marcus said simply. "Life happened." David nodded. "Tell me." And so Marcus told his story. Chicago, South Side, parents who scraped together money for an old upright piano when he was 7, playing with jazz groups by 15, dreaming of Juilliard. Then his father got cancer. Marcus took a factory job instead of applying to music schools, Met Diana, married, 3 kids in 5 years. The factory closed when he was 38. 7 months unemployed. When the custodial job opened here, he took it without hesitation. And you've been here ever since, as David said? Yes, sir. We sold our piano years ago, when my youngest needed braces. David was quiet for a long moment. You know what I think about, Marcus? All the people who have dreams they never get to live, all the songs that don't get sung because life gets in the way, and how much the world loses when that happens. I'm 58 years old, Mr. Letterman. That ship has sailed. Has it? David pushed his glasses up. What are you doing tomorrow night? I'll be here, working. Not tomorrow night, you won't. David's face broke into that sideways grin. Tomorrow night, you're going to be on this show. You're going to sit at this piano and play, really play, on television for everyone. Marcus felt the floor tilt. Mr. Letterman, I'm not, people don't just, yes, they do, when they should, when it matters. David stood straight. I have complete creative control over this show. It's in my contract. And I'm telling you right now, Marcus Williams, you are going to be on the Late Show tomorrow night, if you'll have us. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus's mind was reeling. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. Dreams didn't come true at 58. Not when you'd spent 20 years with a mop and a bottle of wood polish. But David was still standing there, waiting for an answer. And the look on his face was absolutely serious. Why would you do this? David took off his glasses and cleaned them. Because I heard you playing tonight. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. That feeling when art reminds you that beauty exists. You gave me that, Marcus. Now I want to give you something back. Marcus felt tears burning at his eyes. 40 years of deferred dreams came crashing through at once. I don't know what to say. Say yes, David said simply. Marcus looked at the piano, then at the empty theater stretching into darkness. Tomorrow night an audience would sit there, cameras would roll, and he would play. Yes, Marcus whispered, then stronger, yes. The next day moved in a blur. At 4 p.m., Marcus walked through the front entrance for the first time in his life. A production assistant met him, walked him to the stage where David and the music director waited. They rehearsed. Marcus would be the final guest. David would interview him, then Marcus would play. Not round midnight, and Marcus surprised himself by choosing Duke Ellington's Azure instead. Your choice, always, David said. By 5:30, the audience filed in. Marcus watched from backstage, his wife Diana and their 3 kids in the front row. The show began. Monologue, 2 guests, everything normal. Then David turned to the camera with a different expression. Our final guest tonight is someone special. He's not a celebrity, but he's got a story you need to hear and a talent you need to witness. Please welcome Marcus Williams. Marcus walked out. The lights were blinding. David stood extending his hand, smiling that genuine smile. Marcus, David said as they sat, tell people what you do. I'm a custodian here, 20 years. But last night, David's tone shifted. I came back late and heard someone playing the piano. Really playing, and I found Marcus here, playing Thelonious Monk in the middle of the night. The audience leaned in. Marcus told his story again. The piano his parents bought, the dreams, the choices made for family. Faces in the audience nodded, wiped their eyes. Everyone understood putting dreams aside. Marcus, what does people like you mean? David asked when Marcus said he'd never expected to be here. People who work behind the scenes. People whose dreams didn't pan out. But you have a gift. A real gift. David stood. And for 20 years you've been playing in the dark. That ends tonight. The audience caught the shift immediately. This wasn't a joke setup. Marcus, I want you to go to that piano and play for everyone what you played for me last night. Marcus walked to the piano, sat down. The theater went silent. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him. And beyond the theater, the eyes of millions watching at home. He adjusted the bench, put his hands on the keys, took a breath, and began Azure. The melody emerged like something that had been waiting there all along. Duke Ellington's composition was gorgeous in its simplicity. It seemed a love song, basically, but one that contained decades of jazz history in its chord changes and melodic line. Marcus played it tenderly, letting each note breathe, giving space for the silences between phrases to speak as loudly as the sound itself. His left hand created a gentle harmonic cushion, moving through the progressions with the subtle sophistication of someone who'd internalized the language of jazz over a lifetime. His right hand sang the melody, embellishing it here and there, but mostly letting Ellington's gorgeous work speak for itself. Marcus forgot the audience, forgot the cameras. This was what he'd been born to do. Not to clean, not to maintain, but to create beauty from nothing more than fingers and keys and the mysterious alchemy that turns organized sound into emotion. He took a solo chorus, venturing further from the melody, but never abandoning it entirely. Each phrase led logically to the next, building a musical argument that resolved in unexpected but satisfying ways. This was the real Marcus Williams, the one who'd been hidden underneath the uniform and anonymity for all these years. As he played, tears rolled down his cheeks, tears of release, of joy, of grief for lost years, of gratitude. His hands knew the way even as the piano blurred in his vision. He brought it home to the final chorus, playing it simply, coming back to the essential truth of the melody. The last chord hung in the air until it faded to silence. For a moment, absolute quiet. Then the audience exploded. Standing ovation. Thunderous, sustained, genuine applause. Marcus looked up from the keys and saw the entire audience standing. In the front row, Diana had her hands over her mouth, crying. His children were on their feet. Perfect strangers were wiping their eyes. David was standing too, clapping hard, his face showing an expression Marcus had never seen in 20 years of watching the show. It was pride, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition, validation, the joy of witnessing something rare and real. Marcus walked to David, who grabbed his hand and raised it high like a referee declaring a champion. The applause continued, wave after wave of sound that washed over Marcus and threatened to undo him completely. "Ladies and gentlemen," David said, voice thick with emotion, "Marcus Williams." More applause, more standing ovation. Marcus didn't know what to do with his body, where to look, how to process what was happening. So he did the only thing that made sense. He bowed. A simple, honest bow of gratitude. When he straightened from his bow, David pulled him into a real embrace. Not a Hollywood air kiss or a careful sideways hug, a full embrace between two men who, despite the enormous gulf in their public lives, understood something essential about each other in that moment. "Thank you," Marcus whispered. "No," David said, "thank you." Later in David's dressing room, they talked about what came next. David had connections in the jazz world, real connections. Clubs that would book Marcus, recording opportunities, chances to actually be a professional musician if that's what he wanted. David couldn't guarantee success, but he could guarantee doors opening that had been closed for 40 years. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus asked. "You don't even know me." "I know what I heard," David said simply. "I know talent when I encounter it. And I know that I have the power to help make something good happen. Why wouldn't I use that power?" Marcus thought about his custodial job, the steady paycheck, the security he'd built his life around. He thought about his wife and his kids, about the responsibilities that had defined his choices for decades. And then he thought about how it felt to play that piano tonight, to share his gift with the world, to finally be the person he'd always known he was underneath everything else. "I'm interested," Marcus said. David smiled and raised his glass. "Good. Then let's get to work." 6 months later, Marcus Williams released his first album, After Midnight. It was a nod to the Thelonious Monk tune that had started everything. The critics were kind, calling it an assured debut from a mature artist with a distinctive voice. It didn't top any charts, but it sold steadily, found its audience, became the kind of album serious jazz listeners sought out. More importantly, Marcus played, really played. He had regular gigs at respected clubs in New York. He did a few tours, nothing huge, but solid regional shows that paid the bills and then some. He kept his health insurance through the musicians' union instead of through a custodial job. He came home to Diana most nights smelling of cigarette smoke and whiskey from club atmospheres, but with light in his eyes she hadn't seen in decades. He still cleaned, but now it was his own house, his own piano, a beautiful used Steinway that David had helped him find and purchase. Every morning Marcus made coffee, sat down at that piano and played for an hour before doing anything else. Because he'd learned something important. Dreams deferred don't have to be dreams denied. Sometimes they're just dreams waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right chance encounter in an empty theater at 2 a.m. David kept Marcus's business card in his desk drawer. Sometimes when frustrated, he'd pull it out and remember the night a janitor became a musician. It reminded him why television mattered, why taking risks on real moments was always worth it. The Ed Sullivan Theater hired a new custodian, but everyone who worked there knew Marcus Williams's story. It became part of the building's lore, proof that sometimes dreams don't die. They just wait in the dark until someone finally decides to turn on the lights. That night, Marcus didn't just play a song. He played his life, his choices, his hope. He played for everyone who'd ever put dreams aside to do the responsible thing. He played for David Letterman, who'd seen past the uniform to the human underneath and decided that human deserved to be heard. The janitor became a musician, not because of magic or luck, but because someone with power chose to use that power for good. Because one man heard another man's gift and decided it was too important to be hidden. That's not entertainment. That's grace. The show didn't stop for a commercial break. It stopped for a dream that refused to die, and in that stopping, something beautiful was born.